Now, as a two-handed individual, I can only imagine that having just one hand comes with some challenges. You one-handers probably struggle with stuff like clapping, opening jars, folding fitted sheets, tying shoelaces, things us two-handers take for granted. On the other hand, I bet there are things that you're absolutely incredible at, like arm wrestling, rock, paper, scissors, picking your nose, giving directions, those little finger skateboards, other one-handed tasks that we shall not speak of here. I don't know. I've never really asked someone with one hand. If you have just one hand, let me know in the comments. What kinds of things are you extra amazing at? But regardless, one area where modern technology has genuinely made life easier is gaming. We've reached a point where a tiny rectangle from China can emulate 17,000 consoles, run for 12 hours on a charge, survive being launched across the room during an emotionally unstable boss fight, and lots of them can actually be played comfortably with just one hand, which is obviously fantastic if you only have one hand. But here's the thing, even if you have both of your factory installed meat mitts, one-handed gaming is surprisingly awesome. Like, maybe you're drinking coffee and you want to slide blocks in a puzzle game. Maybe you're holding a baby and you want to grind an RPG. Maybe you're going for a walk and you want to pretend that you're holding a little phone instead of a video game toy so your neighbors don't think you're a child in the body of a grown man even though you totally are. Maybe you're lying on the couch in that weird sideways shrimp position where one arm has no chance of being useful anytime soon. There are lots of good reasons to want to do this, and the good news is that it's actually totally a thing you can do. Some handhelds work amazing for this, which we'll talk about, but there are actually a surprising number of games that work brilliantly with one hand, which we'll also talk about. That's the video today. I want to dive into the wonderfully niche, aggressively handy world of one-handed retro gaming. We'll talk about why you'd want to do this in the first place, which handhelds are best for it, and what kind of games work well without giving yourself repetitive game thumb syndrome, which I just invented. Because sometimes you've only got one hand free, and sometimes the other one is busy holding another retro handheld because you can't stop buying these stupid little rectangles. Welcome to the channel. Before we start looking at specific handhelds though, we should probably answer an important question. What actually makes a handheld good for one-handed gaming? Because it turns out it's not as simple as small equals good. Obviously, weight matters. Your one lonely hand is doing all the work now. It's supporting the handheld, balancing it, pushing all the buttons. It's carrying this entire relationship. So the lighter the handheld is, the longer you can comfortably play before your weak dweeby arm gives out and you have to do the unthinkable and stop playing your game. But honestly, I think the biggest factor is reach. Can your thumb and fingers around the back comfortably reach everything you need? Because here's the thing, with one hand, your thumb is basically your entire control scheme. If it has to stretch halfway across the device every time you need to push a button or whatever, that's gonna get old real fast. Ideally, you want something where your thumb can rest kinda in the middle of the device, easily able to reach both the D-pad and the face buttons, and your fingers around back should be able to reach any back bumper buttons or triggers. I do think that vertical handhelds have a distinct advantage here. For example, on the TRIMUI brick, your fingers naturally curl around the back. They support most of the weight, and your thumb has a really nice angle to reach almost everything on the front. However, some horizontal handhelds are good for this too because some of them have two analog sticks, and you can actually set up the right analog stick to act as a D-pad. For example, on the MAGICX XU Mini M, this one you could just open the RetroArch settings and change the D-pad style to the right analog. And now you can do D-pad stuff over here. Also, if you want to get fancy, if you need to, you can rebind the controls entirely. Set the bumper and trigger on the right to be L1 and R1. And you don't have a start button, so you can set the thumbstick R3 click as start. There you go. Access to everything you need, all on this one side of the doodad. I personally find verticals a lot more comfy for this, but if you have a smaller horizontal and only one free hand, you can get away with this in a pinch. Of course, it really does matter how many controls the game actually expects you to use. If you're playing Game Boy or NES, or even Super Nintendo or Sega Genesis, Game Boy Advance, most arcade, that's easy. Actually, I'd say that probably the vast majority of retro games only need a D-pad and around 4 buttons anyway. The problem comes when you get into more modern systems. PS1 is usually fine because the sticks were optional on that system, but like N64, Dreamcast, PSP, and beyond, those systems tended to need sticks and D-pad and bumpers and triggers, and whatever nonsense the N64 was trying to pull. So that stuff may give you problems, or at least you should expect to need to do some control rebinding. Thankfully, most retro games were designed back when games went for a more minimalist approach to the controls. So really, those are the big things I'm looking for. Lightweight, easy thumb reach, simple controls, and maybe good remapping if it's needed. That's what you need in a handheld for this. Get those 4 things right, and then one-handed gaming is going to stop feeling like a compromise and kind of become one of those like weird little quality of life hacks that makes you wonder why you weren't doing it years ago. Actually, now that we know what's important, let's actually get into the actual handhelds and which ones actually work for this, actually. But first, I need to mention that hands are different. Everyone has different hands. Some of us have big, chunky, meaty paws. Some of us have skinny, long, articulate octopus fingers. Some of us have the small, dainty, supple hands of a preteen girl. I hear it all the time in my comments. People say that this or that thing is too small or too big for their hands, even though it felt perfect for me. So this is just the handhelds that I find work well for my hands. And just for the record, I have sorta medium-large hands. I usually go with a large size for gloves, but that's more because I have long, skinny fingers. Here's my hand on a grid so you can get exact measurements. And here it is holding a can of pop for scale. And here it is showing you my longest finger, just for, you know, science reasons. The absolute limit for handheld size for me would be something like the RG40XXV. Anything bigger than this would be a no for me. However, this thing is just doable for my medium-large hands. I have to really stretch my thumb over to reach the D-pad. However, the stick is more reachable and comfortable, so that's probably what I'd be using most of the time on here. I can even reach the left bumpers and triggers with my finger. This has a 4-inch screen, so if you have bigger hands, or hand and want a bigger screen, this is probably the best way to get that. One-handed mode. Oh, by the way, I'll include links to all of these devices in the thingy below if you're looking to pick any of them up. Moving along, the 3.5-inch devices are where things get super comfy. And there are lots of 3.5-inch devices. The RG35XX Plus, the BATLEXP G350, even the cheaper doodads like the Pow Kitty RGB20S and the R36S. These things are really comfy for me, and I think that even if you have smaller hands, you can get away with something like this. I can easily reach the D-pad and the sticks and the face buttons, and it's actually pretty much the ideal configuration for this because my thumb just naturally finds everything it needs exactly where it expects to. My personal favorite 3.5-inch device is also a device that I recommend all the time, the Miyoo Mini Plus. It's slightly shorter than lots of the 3.5-inch devices, which means that I can hold it on all 4 sides, so it's super tight in my grip. And the controls are exactly perfect for my thumb shape and size. The bumpers and triggers are easy to push from any angle, and it has this little empty area in the middle for you to rest your thumb there when you're not pushing buttons. So if you're playing this while walking or doing other stuff, you don't have to awkwardly find something to do with your thumb and not wreck your game. I also wanted to give a little shout out to flippy screen doodads because these are more or less the same as vertical doodads. However, I actually find them a little bit more comfy to hold with one hand. And I think that's mostly because they tend to have thin squarish shapes for the bottom part, which are nice to grip one-handed. I find the RG35XXSP is a little bit too large for this. However, the 34XXSP and the Miyoo Flip are both excellent to play one-handed. And, of course, I gotta hand it to the Miyoo Mini Flip because this thing is super easy to play. It's a lot smaller than most doodads, and I can reach every control, including the bumpers and triggers on the left side. This is probably among my favorite one-handed doodads. For horizontals, the only real viable options are the ones with analog sticks because you can remap those sticks to be the D-pads. And since you're not able to actually grip the whole device while you use it, you really want a smaller device, otherwise it's going to be too heavy and awkward to hold. My favorite horizontal is the MAGICX XU Mini M. Anything bigger than this doesn't feel good to me. If you have smaller hands, there are a good few options. The TRIMUI brick is like a slightly smaller Miyoo Mini Plus. I don't like it quite as much for some reason. The Miyoo Mini Plus feels a little bit better to me, but it's still totally doable, and the TRIMUI brick is more powerful, so you can play some of that higher end stuff. At least the stuff that has controls that work one-handed. My all-time favorite device for this is the original Miyoo Mini, the non-plus Miyoo Mini, and that's also my all-time favorite handheld in general. However, sadly, you can't buy this anymore, so, I can't suggest that you get one for this. It's a shame because this is such a one-handed champ. I've legit played through many games while going for long walks on this thing. So if you have one of these, or if you can somehow find one, this is easily my top pick, but you probably can't, so the Miyoo Mini Plus is the next best option. So we got our handhelds. Now, what are we supposed to actually play? Well, as it turns out, quite a lot. One-handed gaming isn't necessarily about the genre. It's more about how demanding a game is. If it lets you play at your own pace and doesn't require your fingers to perform anything elaborate, there's a good chance it'll work just fine. Turn-based RPGs are probably the kings of one-handed gaming. They're slow, menu-driven, and almost always happy to let you play at your own pace. Whether it's Dragon Warrior, Final Fantasy, Chrono Trigger, Pokemon, or one of the other 8 million retro RPGs, most of your time is spent exploring, talking to people, managing your inventory, and picking commands from menus. Even the games with active time battle systems are usually simple enough to manage one-handed. The monsters, dragons, and world-ending villains will all wait patiently while you grab a coffee, pet the cat, or do whatever important one-handed business you have to attend to. Strategy games are another fantastic fit for one-handed gaming because absolutely nothing happens until you decide it's time for something to happen. These games don't test your reflexes, they test your decision-making. Advance Wars, Fire Emblem, Shining Force, and countless others are built entirely around taking your time, studying the map, planning your next move, and executing it, and then immediately realizing how flawed it was when the enemy takes out most of your units with one fell swoop. That's usually how it goes for me, at least. Puzzle games are another natural fit for one-handed gaming, especially slower ones like Picross and Bookworm. These games are all about using your brain, not your finger dexterity, figuring things out at your own pace. So they work beautifully when you've got only one thumb available for active duty. Now, not every puzzle game is slow. Stuff like Tetris can get pretty intense once those blocks start piling up, but honestly, that's okay too. As long as you're willing to accept the added challenge of the one-handed handicap, pun intended, a lot of these faster puzzle games are still fun, even with the extra challenge. I'm even going to toss pinball games in here. You might need to rebind the controls to something more comfortable, but the games rarely use more than just 2 buttons, so it's usually quick and easy. Card games are great, whether you're playing poker or solitaire, Pokemon TCG, some weird casino game you found in your ROM list, or even digital board games like Monopoly and Risk. They're all built around making decisions rather than reacting quickly. They're relaxing and perfect for those moments when your other hand is occupied with something equally important, like clicking the subscribe button. Turn-based roguelikes are one of my personal favorite genres for this because they feel like a middle ground between action RPGs and turn-based. But in roguelikes, nothing happens until you make your move. Games like Pokemon Mystery Dungeon, Shiren the Wanderer, and Dragon Crystal, they let you take as much time as you need to think through a situation before committing to it, or just spamming your way through exploration or slow fights. And yes, even some action games can work surprisingly well one-handed. The trick is finding games that don't ask too much of your thumb all at once. Simple platformers like Kirby's Dream Land are still pretty good because the controls are so straightforward, and you can bind the bumper and the trigger to jump and action buttons if you need to do 2 things at once. Golf games work beautifully because they're more about timing and planning than constant inputs. Even some shooters are totally doable, again, if you remap the fire button to a bumper or trigger. Really, this category is less about the genre and more about complexity. Some games feel fantastic one-handed, while others feel like you're trying to perform surgery with oven mitts on. There's a lot of trial and error involved, but you'd be surprised how many games become playable once you stop assuming that you need 2 hands for everything. That said, there are many types of games that definitely do not work for this. Well, technically they can work in the same way that you technically can eat soup with a fork, but like at a certain point, you're no longer enjoying a relaxing one-handed gaming experience. You're just torturing yourself by trying to play a game that demands every button, every finger, and every ounce of your attention. So just try stuff and you'll pretty quickly find the kinds of games that work and the kinds of games that definitely do not work. So yeah, one-handed gaming is definitely a thing. Whether you're holding a coffee or a baby or petting the cat, carrying groceries, walking around, or if you genuinely only have one hand, unlike the rest of us fakers, it's something worth trying. You might be surprised at how well it works and how comfortable it is, and also you'll probably learn that there are more games that work this way than you expect. It's a weird little corner of the hobby that most people never think about, but once you find the right handheld and the right games, it is surprisingly convenient and useful to do. So give it a try. Worst case scenario, you decide it's not for you. Best case scenario, you've unlocked an entirely new way to justify buying another handheld. Or 7. And that's it from me for today. I'm TechDweeb, thanks for watching, bye bye.